Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Now, very quick video today. I've had lots of questions recently asking me about my graphic settings. What do I have? Will I share them? And also lots of questions about OBS, my capture settings. What do I do? Well, in this video, I'm going to try and explain it all relatively quickly to at least give you a bit of a benchmark. So first we'll start with my NVIDIA control panel settings. It's nothing exciting. But my setup is slightly different because obviously I create content. So the screens that I use are 165 Hertz. But because I create content, I set them at 120 Hertz. Now, a bit of an early tip. If you are creating content, always try and have your simulated frame rates in multiples of 60, 120, 180, 240. That's if you're capturing your gameplay on OBS at 60 Hertz. So obviously those refresh rates I mentioned, they're all multiples of 60. That just helps with frame timing to make sure that you don't get those weird little judders. But double check your frame rate on Windows on the display information because it might actually be 119.988 or something like that. So not exactly 120 Hertz. And if that's the case and you are capturing your gameplay on OBS, then you will have to have a slightly different capture refresh rate. I'll explain that in a little while. So I'll show you my NVIDIA control panel. And that's not a euphemism. So as I alluded to, I have my monitors set to 120 Hertz. But I am capturing all this on a secondary PC with a capture card. So I do have a cloned display. Now you'll see there 1, 2, 3. So the number 3 there is my main center monitor. Number 4 is my Elgato capture card. So I just clone these two together. So what you see is my center monitor. And as I mentioned, I have these set to 120 Hertz, all of them. So I do have G-Sync enabled for windowed and full screen mode. Into the 3D settings, I haven't really made many changes at all. The only changes I've made is the low latency mode to ultra. Obviously the monitor's there. G-Sync compatible. If you set it up in here, this will automatically change to G-Sync compatible. And I turn vertical sync off. Now, all this is what works for me and gives me the best capture at the other side. So a lot of people recommend having game mode on, but I found that my gameplay and captures are better with game mode off. But I do have optimized for windowed games on, and I have my hardware accelerated GPU scheduling on. And because I'm running G-Sync, I've got this option for variable refresh rate. So I'll jump very quickly onto OBS. And a lot of people watch many videos on YouTube. These are the best capture settings. That's the best capture settings. You can't go wrong with OBS, the simple output. You don't need to mess on too much with the settings. I'll show you what mine are. So first thing we do, go to settings, go to advanced, change the process priority to above normal. Color space to Rec 709, color range to limited. That's if you are using the default color range within Windows. If you start changing these to full, things get a little bit washed out. Onto video, 2560 by 1440, frames per second, 59.94. So if your refresh rate is bang on 120 and you're happy with that, have it at 60. But a good way to find out your monitor's refresh rate is head to displayhertz.com, open the window and leave that running on your system for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then it will give you an accurate refresh rate for your monitor. So onto output. And as I mentioned, you can go advanced and you can have all these different changes here. Stay on simple. You don't really need to. That's what I have mine. Recording, high quality, medium file size, fragmented MP4, and I have the NVENC H.264 encoder. And I do have 2 audio tracks, 1 for the game volume, 2 for the mic volume, so I can make changes in post, increase or decrease the volume, edit out all of the heavy breathing and clicks from the gear shifters. And that's pretty much it from OBS. Really, really simple. Now, onto the iRacing graphics. So we're in the replay from a recent race I did at Monza. Fixed Ferrari, sunny weather, lots of cars, lots of shadows, grandstands are packed. There's definitely lots going on. You can see here, even with my system, I'm only sitting at about 85, 86 frames a second. But I'll show you why. So we'll go into the options, go into the graphics settings, and there's my resolution, 7680 by 1440. I don't have any of this FSR stuff on. Reflex enabled and boost. I'll show you my monitor settings really quick. So 3 flat screens, 60-degree angle, 165-degree field of view. Now, I do increase that in the simulator to about 175. Now, I know there is a correct field of view. You put all the numbers in and then that's your field of view. But I've always been an advocate of having a field of view that feels right. Experiment, go lower, go higher. See what works for you. Put the numbers in, get a ballpark, but don't be afraid to tinker to make sure it feels comfortable. So we're going to the graphics settings proper now. So sky clouds, medium. I don't think there's any need for going any higher. Cars, high. I always want the highest detail for the cars. Pit objects, low detail. I'm not racing in the pits. I'm not bothered too much about that. I don't care what that looks like when I'm racing. Event, high detail. Grandstands, high detail. If I don't have the grandstands on the high detail, I feel like I'm missing out. Crowds, low detail. They look all right there, but it's just rendering the front of them. The higher you go, the more of the crowd it renders. So if you have high detail, it would render their backs. Who cares what their backs look like? So low detail for me. Objects, high detail. That's really important for braking markers and all that kind of stuff. Particles, high detail, and full res. Turn off this foliage nonsense. Now, max cars 63. So set this to 63. That's the maximum number that you can have. Obviously, 62 car grid plus the pace car. If you don't have it set to the maximum, then you might miss out on some incidents or some cars. Things just look a bit funny. Don't worry, it doesn't render 63 cars. That's taken care of with these numbers here, but set that to 63. 20 cars for me is plenty in a race. I'm never going to see more than 20 cars in front anyway. So 20 cars in front, 8 cars in the mirror. For me, that's plenty. Dynamic level of detail, I have that set to world plus minus minimum. I don't want many changes at all. And I have the car level of detail off. I don't want any changes to the car. No frame rate limit. Now, this is where the nice stuff happens. And this is where you'll gain some frame rate if you make changes. So anti-aliasing method, MSAA. MSAA samples 4x simple. I think that works fine on 1440. Shadow maps and clouds on. Object self-shadowing on. And dynamic objects in the main view. Night shadow maps on. Shader quality, I have that set to ultra detail. There's not much difference between high and ultra, but I've got the headroom, so I'll go for ultra. On the right-hand side, turn off the steering wheel because I don't want to see two. 2 past trees, that doesn't really do anything for me. I don't really notice a huge difference. High quality trees, however, there is a little bit of a difference in how it looks, so I think that's worth having on. Cockpit mirrors max 1. Now, I'm cheating here really, so when you watch my videos, you can see the mirror there, but that's the only one that I'm rendering. And in truth, I don't even look at that one ever. I use the virtual mirror. So if I had my way, I wouldn't have any mirrors at all. I would just use the virtual mirror, unless I'm doing one of those point of view videos where I want immersion, I don't want any UI. But under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have the mirrors on if I was running the virtual mirror. But a bit of a cheat for me, just so it looks better on camera. Don't need the high details in mirrors. The iRacing mirrors, I think, are fine. Headlights, high detail. Don't need the headlights on track. Virtual mirror, I have mine set to 65. And I always think it looks pretty good. And motion blur, off. SSR, I just have that in the rain, low only. Don't have any sharpening. I have HDR on. Video memory swap, high-res cars, and high-res textures. And I have distortion on. All that does is give you a little bit of heat haze from the exhaust. And I don't have heat haze on. I think that looks a bit weird during the race. But in the replay, however, slightly different. So I have pit objects medium, and I have the crowds on medium, and I have more cars drawn. Same option in the middle, but I do have 2 past trees on, show driver's arms, and I have maximum cockpit mirrors and motion blur high strength. Now I just have the motion blur on to make things look a little bit better when I'm capturing my screenshots. Now, if you want to get a few more frames, this is what I would suggest that you do. So, as you can see, start of the race, Monza, 84, 85, 86 frames a second. Lots going on, lots of shadows, lots of cars, grandstands are full, but not really great frame rates. But that's because I've set certain things in the replay graphic settings, which makes it a little bit rubbish. But that's just so I can capture a better looking screenshot for the thumbnails. But let's make some changes and see what FPS we can actually gain. So we'll go to options and we'll go to graphics. On the left hand side here, if you can, I would leave these as they are. Try and have these as high as possible. It's the ones in the middle and a couple on here that are going to give you the most boost. So we'll go to replay, middle ones, shadow maps, shadow clouds on. Right. If you don't have them on, I think it looks rubbish. So we'll turn those off, right? Straight away, we've gained over 20 frames per second just by turning the shadow maps on, the cloud shadow maps. But it doesn't look very nice. Turn that back on, graphics, replay, shadow maps on. Just looks a bit better, a bit more detail in the distance. I just think it looks better overall, but 20 frames a second is 20 frames a second. So object self-shadowing. Now, this is the shadows cast by the grandstands and all that kind of stuff, and they can have shadow maps cast onto those as well. So here, turning it off gains us a couple of frames per second, not a huge amount, but that's just this scene. That number will change slightly. But I think with that off, I don't think it's very, very nice at all. So I leave that on. Now, dynamic objects. This is a killer. So we're at 85 frames a second. We'll turn that off 15 frames a second by turning off the dynamic objects. Now, what that does, if you look at the shadows under the cars there, there are shadows, but not dynamic, not really proper shadows. We'll turn that on. You can see the shadows got a bit more depth, probably see it better with this view actually. So if you look at the shadows on the side cast by the cars, we'll turn that off. They're all gone. It doesn't look very good. It looks like they're floating. It doesn't look very nice. So for me, I have that on. I just think it looks much, much better. So next thing, 85 frames a second, cockpit mirrors, turn those off, 85 up to 95, 96, 97. So about 12 frames per second just by turning off the mirrors. Now, if we turn everything off in the middle, 112, so we're at 85, so about 27, 28 frames a second we've gained by just changing the cockpit mirrors and these in the middle. But put those back as they were. We should be back down to about 85 frames a second. But here's the real killer. Go to replay. Motion blur. 85 frames a second. Turn it off. Boom. Look at that. Straight up to 130 frames a second. 45 frames lost with the motion blur. So if you didn't want some of the middle bits on, so if you didn't want the dynamic objects on, turn that off. There, 160 odd frames a second from 85. So that's where the gains are made. Turn off the shadows, turn off the dynamic shadow maps, turn off the motion blur. I don't have it on when I'm racing. I only have it on when creating screenshots. It looks nice, but as you can see there, it's an absolute frame rate killer. So hopefully this helps. It might give you an idea of actually what's killing your frame rate. So if this video helped you at all, please remember to click the like button. And if you want to see more, please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great week. See you later. Cheers.